What's going on, guys? Liam Rogers from the 303 Garage here, and today we're going to be pulling a Subaru engine. I'll be showing you guys how step by step. This is just a process I've used. I don't know if it's an official process to use, but we'll be going step by step just how I've pulled. I've pulled two of them before, and now we've got to pull this one back out because the clutch throw-up bearing didn't seat properly for this project. But this will just be a general video you can look up to find out how to pull a Subaru engine. So, what we're pulling is an 03 WRX engine, EJ205, out of my 93 Legacy project car. Don't worry, that's a weird combination. It's the same for most Subarus, especially turbo Subarus. It's basically the same exact thing to pull them out. So, step one, you're going to want to lift the car up, put it on jack stands, and take off the front wheels so you can get underneath the car and you can get the engine hoist over and get those two sidearms under the car when it's time. Step two, you're going to want to drain the engine of all its fluids. You're going to want to drain the radiator and all the coolant out of the engine, and you're going to want to drain all the oil. The oil's already out of this because we never had time to put it in before we had to pull it again. And the radiator, he's about to drain. When you're draining the fluids, such as the oil in the radiator, it helps to pop off the cap for the coolant so that it can flow out faster. And you'd want to pop off the oil cap if you were draining the oil.
Bolts, that'll take. Kind of looks like pee, doesn't it? You filming it?
If your pee's looking green, then you need to see a doctor. Step three, you're going to start taking stuff off. I recommend you take the hood off. It'll just make things easier when you actually get the engine hoist above the car. It'll give you a lot more clearance, and it's only 4 bolts to take off. It's fairly easy. Along with that, along with when you first start taking stuff off, you want to start taking off the intake system. So you're going to want to disconnect your mass airflow sensor, take off your air filter. This is probably going to be a stock air box for you, might be aftermarket. Just take off this hose clamp right here where it connects to this pipe right here, and then disconnect the intercooler piping. So the intercooler will most likely be sitting here. Just take off either of these hose clamps. Take off the hose clamp that's right there on the turbocharger. Take off either the mounting, if it's mounted to either of these brackets, and then lift it off. Step 4, you're going to want to disconnect vacuum lines and electrical lines. Now over here it's pretty simple. You should just have 2 going over here to the boost controller solenoid. 1 goes down in here into the turbo. It's sort of a tee off the wastegate. So let me just pop that off real quick. Okay, disconnecting from the boost controller solenoid, you want to disconnect this line going to the front of your intake. Next, you're going to want to disconnect the power plug over here. Over here, you're going to have this brown plug and this big black plug. They pop off of this bracket, and then you can disconnect them. So I'll do that real quick. Over here, you'll have 3 fuel lines. You'll have one from the fuel filter itself, and then these other 2. You're also going to have this line that runs over here to the brake booster. Just pop that off. All 3 of our gas lines are disconnected now. Farther back. But right here, disconnecting AC. Most of these clips you're going to need pliers for, just to get your hand in there. We'll get this green one out. On top of the alternator, you'll have this connection, which is just a 10mm bolt, I'm pretty sure. You can just crank that off and pull it off. Make sure to put the bolt back on where you got it so that you know where it goes. I stand corrected, this is actually a 12mm bolt. Currently, Dad is taking out the top. He already disconnected the bottom pipe of the radiator to get the coolant out, so now he's disconnecting the top pipe to get it out of the way, and then he'll pull the radiator out. It's just 2 mount brackets on the top. You may want to disconnect this coolant pipe, but what we found is you don't really have to. And then over here, there's 2 coolant lines running from the reservoir over there into the radiator. Those are pretty simple to take off. We'll show you that. Before you pull anything, you're going to want to disconnect the radiator fans on the bottom. It's a plug. It's a plug right there. If you can see that, I'm going to try and crop the image in. And a plug right here. They're fairly easy to pull out. You just push the clip in on the top and then pull. They pop right out. They may not be as easy. Clips are never as easy as they look when you're watching someone else's tutorial. I want to disconnect the power steering pump, little pipe that comes from its reservoir right there, just to get out of the way. Okay, so next up you're going to want to disconnect the down pipe. This is going to be your worst enemy, by the way, because these bolts are always very tough to get off because they're heated and reheated, and I think they're torqued to 200 foot-pounds or something. But first of all, you're going to want to get this O2 sensor off. I normally just get it off with a crescent wrench.
Starter, Liam? It takes 20.
So O2 sensor comes out.
The starter have to be disconnected? Okay, he's filming taking the starter out right now. So, just want you to be aware of those 2 bolts that that are connected to the transmission.
I don't know how good the GoPro is in low light. You might be able to see it, but it's right here next to the CV axle. There's one on each side. It's a 14mm. It's very hard to get to. They weren't tightened down very far because we weren't finished putting this engine in. So you're going to want a bendy wrench, most likely like this, to get to it, and you're going to want to get under the car and cuss a lot to get that bolt off. Dad is taking off the front accessory belt stuff, so the AC. You don't have to disconnect the lines like we're doing right now. We're only doing that because the AC isn't charged and it'll make it easier for us. First, you're going to want to disconnect the alternator. It's the bolt here. Just loosen that a good amount. Actually, just take that completely out, and then loosen this to get the tension off the belt, and then take off the last bolt over here, which will disconnect the alternator completely. And then there's going to be 4 bolts holding down the AC compressor. We'll show them to you. You'll want to pull those out. You probably wouldn't have to do this, but that's where we like to get our mounting points to pull the engine out physically from. So yeah. Also, you're going to want to disconnect this one piece of the power steering pump. It's just a bolt. I think it's 14. Yeah. I'll actually do that right now because it's here. Now, you're probably going to have to bleed your power steering system for this because you're disconnecting this main bolt on the pump. But you can always just bleed it later to fix it. Okay, so with your clutch fork here, it has a little pin that goes through it, or not a little pin, a really thick pin. The way you get that out is you take actually your battery holder. It'll have threading on it. You take that threading, you thread it into this little hole here. Sometimes this hole is covered with a hex bolt. It's a 10mm hex bolt if you need that. Well, actually I have to find that because I forgot that it's there. And then you take that hex bolt off, and then you stick this in and you try and thread in your battery holder, and then you just pull it out like so. Now, I had already threaded it in and loosened it a bit. It's probably going to be pretty difficult to get it out on your first try. I'm just getting this bolt that's on the transmission out of the way that I already put back on because it's sort of in my way here. But once you get that off, just pull it out more. Pull it out sort of to the end. Take this off, unthread this, and then you can just pull off this pin right here that holds your clutch thing. A lot of people forget about this when they're taking off WRX engines because it's not really a bolt or anything, and it's sort of hidden. So we'll just put this here next to the old legacy clutch fork just so I know where it is. We've got our power steering lines, and one goes under your coolant reservoir, and they're bolted to the side here. There's a 10mm here, and then 2 10mm here, one on top, one on bottom, and then you'll want to disconnect the whole coolant reservoir to get that out. I'll show you that here while I take that out. Pop. So it's parallel. Real quick, just so that you can move it out freely.
Trying to remove the lines out of the way.
And then it's out from under. And then this can move to the side. So now you're going to want to disconnect both these throttle bodies. They're actually really easy. Pull it up. Take the cable out from this little edge. There's a little pathway here, a little channel. You can take the cable out and then just pop that out. Do that for both of them. Cruise control is on the left if you're looking straight onto the car, and the physical throttle body itself is on the right. And here You get the back bolt and you loosen it, which will be that direction. And then you just loosen that all the way off. So now we're under the car. I have this O2 sensor that goes right here in the headers, exhaust headers. I normally take it out because my headers make it so there's not much clearance there. I don't think you really have to take it out if you have stock headers, but I'm just getting it out of the way right now. And then you have two motor mounts, one bolt there and one bolt on the other side. Pop those off, and then we should be ready to go. He's mounted the engine up here on the power steering pump. That seems a little weird to mount it here, but apparently that's where we did it before and it pulled out just fine. Here on one of the bolts that goes into the block for the AC. Over here on one of the downpipe bolts for the turbo, not on the downpipe itself, but on the turbocharger. And then over here on one of the bolts that goes into the transmission. I think that's a grounding line. And we're using seat belts because they're strong, they won't rip. They're adjustable, yeah, you can adjust how long they are. And then for this side we're using a chain because you just find the center of the chain and then pull up. So it's actually loose right now. You can see how much shake it has. So before you actually roll this under the car, you're going to want to get under there and get the motor mounts off, because it's much easier than trying to snake in between here, which is what I've done for the last two engines. So I'm going to go under there, pop the motor mounts off real quick, just with a 3/8 wrench, and then we'll connect it up and we'll pull this thing out, hopefully. Okay, so we got it all hooked up, so it should be ready to just... Okay, so I'm filming this way later because the camera died. We've actually got the engine back out and then back in again. But I'm just going to explain to you how you actually get the engine completely out. What you want to do is you'll have a bunch of room here after taking the radiator and everything out. And you'll want to try your best to get the engine off the input shaft for the transmission, because that's basically going to be your main holdup when taking it off. So basically get some leverage, you lift it up a bit with the engine hoist. You get it up a couple inches just so that the motor mount pegs are completely out of the subframe there, so that they're not going to get caught on anything. So the engine's sort of free floating, still attached to the transmission a bit by the input shaft. And then you wiggle it, you pull your whole hoist back so that you've got tension coming this way. And you just start pulling the top of the intake manifold to get some leverage on the top side, and then you can grab down here on the bottom of the exhaust headers and just keep doing that and wiggling and pulling back until eventually it'll completely pop off of the transmission. You should still have a bit of room here. You'll be completely off the input shaft, and then just jack it all the way up. You should clear everything. Make sure you don't have any hookups, like you forgot to connect an electrical line or disconnect an electrical line or something, because that always happens. But you'll probably notice real quick when the engine's not coming out. But it should come out completely cleanly. Just raise it on up and pull it back, and you've got your Subaru engine out of the engine bay and ready for a swap or a repair, whatever you need. Well, that does it for today's video. It's pretty fun to make. I had to pull the engine, so I thought might as well make a step-by-step process for anyone who's looking to pull a Subaru WRX engine or just a Subaru engine in general, because they're actually fairly easy once you actually know it's. I mean, it was only like 13, 14 steps. I'm actually editing it right now. But yeah, thanks for watching. If this helped you out, then you're welcome. And if you just watched it because it was interesting, then also that's pretty cool. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Cue outro music.